You see them everywhere, right? In gardens, in parks, sitting on our kitchen tables. But what if I told you that behind all that beauty and fragrance, every single flower is caught up in this high-stakes drama of survival, seduction, and, well, reproduction? Today, we're going to pull back the petals and uncover their secret life.
I mean, seriously, for us, they can be a symbol of love or just a nice bit of decoration. But if you look at it from the plant's point of view, a flower has a much more critical mission. It's not about looking pretty for us. It's about making sure the next generation even exists. So let's dive in.
That's it, right there. You should think of a flower as the world's most beautiful and intricate advertisement. Seriously, every single color, every shape, every scent, it's all meticulously designed for one single purpose: sexual reproduction. They are, without a doubt, the most brilliant matchmakers in the natural world.
Okay, so to really get this whole drama, we first need to meet the cast of characters. We're going right inside the flower to get a look at the essential parts that make this entire incredible process even possible.
It really all comes down to two main players. You've got the male parts, called the stamen, which is basically the anther, that's the pollen factory, held up high by a stalk, called the filament. And then you have the female parts, the pistil, which has this sticky landing pad up top, called the stigma, a tube, called the style, and down at the base, the ovary, which holds the really precious cargo, the ovules.
So what is this stuff we call pollen? Well, each one of those tiny little grains is basically a microscopic armored capsule. Think of it like a tiny delivery truck carrying the all-important male genes on what is often a super perilous journey.
And what makes these little capsules so tough? It's their outer wall. It's made of a substance called sporopollenin, and get this, it is one of the most indestructible organic materials known to science. It can handle crazy high temperatures, it resists strong acids, and to this day we have not found a single enzyme that can break it down. It's practically invincible. This incredible durability has this really fascinating side effect. Because of that sporopollenin, pollen grains are just perfectly preserved as fossils. They become nature's tiny little time capsules, giving scientists a direct window into what ecosystems looked like millions and millions of years ago. How cool is that?
All right, so we've got our super tough pollen all packed up and ready to go. But how does it get from point A to point B? From the anther of one flower to the stigma of another? This, my friends, brings us to the mission, the Great Pollen Journey.
And that journey has a name: pollination. It sounds simple, right? Just moving pollen from the male part to the female part, but it is an incredibly complex process. You know, since plants can't exactly get up and go on a date, this is how they manage their long-distance relationships to create the next generation.
Now, plants have two main strategies for this. Some play it super safe with self-pollination, just moving pollen within the same plant. It's reliable for sure, but genetically, it's kind of like making a photocopy. The real action, the real game changer, is cross-pollination. That's sending pollen to a totally different plant. That is how you mix up the gene pool and really drive evolution forward. So how does the pollen actually make the trip? Well, plants are master recruiters. They can use non-living forces like wind and water, but their real genius is hiring living helpers. And the list of who they hire is just amazing. It's not just the bees and butterflies we think of. We are talking birds, bats, and get this, even some lemurs and reptiles.
Yeah, but not every flower offers a sweet, sugary reward. To get certain helpers on board, some plants take a bit of a darker approach. To attract flies and beetles, they ditch the sweet perfume and instead start pumping out the smell of rotting meat. I know, it's not pretty, but hey, it works like a charm.
Okay, so the pollen has survived its journey. It's landed on the right kind of stigma. Now we get to the main event. This is the climax of our story. It's a truly remarkable process called double fertilization, and it is something totally unique to flowering plants.
But hold on. First, there's a security check. The pistil doesn't just let any old pollen grain in. It acts like a bouncer, a gatekeeper, and it engages in this complex chemical dialogue, like a secret handshake, with the pollen to make absolutely sure it's from the right species. Only after it gets that positive ID is the pollen allowed to continue.
So once it's approved, a tiny tube starts to grow from the pollen grain, tunneling all the way down to the ovule. It delivers 2 male gametes, and each one has a totally different mission. The first one fuses with the egg cell. That creates the zygote, which is going to become the baby embryo. But the second one does something different. It performs a separate fusion with two other nuclei in a wild event called triple fusion. It's those two things happening at once that give double fertilization its name.
So why that second fusion? What's that all about? Well, it creates something called the endosperm. And this is pure genius. The endosperm is this incredibly nutrient-rich tissue that's basically a dedicated food supply. It is a perfectly packed lunch for the new little embryo, giving it all the energy it needs to get started in life.
So fertilization is complete, the food supply is secured, the flower's job is pretty much done. And now this magical transformation begins. The whole focus shifts from attraction to creation, as the flower begins to become a fruit. Right after fertilization, this beautifully coordinated process kicks off. You've got the ovule, which is busy maturing into a seed, that's the embryo in its packed lunch, and at the exact same time, the ovary all around it starts to swell and ripen. Its walls transform into what we recognize as the fruit.
Now here's a fun fact for you. Botanically speaking, not all fruits are created equal. In what we call true fruits, like a mango or a pea, the fruit develops only from the ovary. But with false fruits, other parts of the flower get in on the action. So that juicy apple you're eating, most of what you're munching on actually developed from the flower's base, not just its ovary.
Now, once the seed is mature, it doesn't just sprout right away. Nope. Most of them enter a state of dormancy. They basically hit the pause button. Their metabolism slows down to a crawl, which lets them survive a harsh winter or a drought, or just wait for the absolute perfect conditions to start growing. It's a brilliant survival strategy.
Okay, as if this whole process wasn't already incredible enough, it turns out plants have a few more absolutely mind-blowing tricks up their sleeves when it comes to survival and reproduction.
So how long can a seed wait? Well, get ready for this. Up in the Arctic tundra, scientists found some ancient lupine seeds that were buried deep in the frozen soil. They estimated their age at 10,000 years. So they planted one, and it grew. A 10,000-year nap, and then new life. That is just a staggering feat of survival.
And finally, some plants have figured out a way to just bypass this entire system. It's a wild genetic loophole called apomixis. Plants like some grasses and citrus trees can actually produce seeds with no fertilization at all. They are essentially creating perfect little clones of themselves, already packaged up and ready to grow.
So from its intricate anatomy and its army of pollinators to its unique double fertilization, the flower is just an absolute masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. The next time you see one, I hope you don't just see a pretty plat. I hope you see this silent, sophisticated story of survival that's been unfolding for millions of years. A story that makes so much of the life on our planet possible.